Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we take a look back at a specific day in history, examine the events of that day, the historical ramifications of that day, and the historical context in which those events took place. As always, if you have not yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification icon to be alerted anytime I post new content. And without any further ado, this day in history, March the 6th. And on this day, in 1836, the Battle of Alamo occurred and came to an end. After a 13-day siege led by the Mexican army, the Alamo fell, and the estimate is between 187 and 267 Texas Revolutionary forces inside were massacred by the Mexican military, led by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. And he was very brutal in the events that occurred. Some American legends were killed in this battle: Davy, Crockett, and Jim Bowie, who would later go on to fame after their death and were already legends in their own time, were killed in the battle. This became a rallying cry for the Texans and the American forces, and would help galvanize the will to victory that would soon occur in the Battle of San Jacinto. So it was a Mexican victory, but in the end, it was really a catalyst to what would come later. Some births that occurred on this day. Now, the subject of this is a subject I'm going to come back to often, and I will discuss at length in these videos, because I think it's the events around his rise to power and his downfall are so important. Tom Foley was born on this day in 1929. Foley was Speaker of the House of Representatives from 1989 to 1995. And he became Speaker after the previous Speaker, Jim Wright, got involved in an ethics scandal. And was driven from power by rabble-rousing led by a congressman of the minority party, who himself would later become Speaker, involved in a very similar ethics scandal. But Foley became Speaker. And Foley was a mild-mannered man, very powerful, very influential. Foley was a creature of a house. He never served a day in the minority. The entire time that he was in Congress, the Democrats, were in the majority. And under his leadership, the House passed updates to the Clean Water Act, passed Americans with Disabilities Act, the Omnibus Budget Act of 1993, which is the bill that helped Clinton balance the budget, the Family Medical Leave Act, the Brady Bill, and NAFTA. Foley was a successful speaker, but he was speaker at a time in which a new form of media was rising, and a political shift was going on in the nation, and he lost his speakership because in the 1994 midterm elections, the Republican Party won control of the House in a massive landslide victory and won control of the House for the first time since 1955. It was so massive that even Foley lost re-election to his own congressional seat. He became the first sitting speaker since 1863 to lose his own seat. And his opponent used Foley's opposition to term limits as one of the main driving forces. Foley lost a very close race to this gentleman by the name of George Nethercutt. Now, Nethercutt ran on term limits, but he would violate that. He pledged to serve a certain amount of terms in Congress, and he didn't hold himself to that standard. And Foley, in my opinion, is just a interesting figure, because, as I said, he lost his own seat in the 1994 election. I consider the 1994 midterm and the events that led up to it to be such an instinctive point of how we got to where we are today in our politics. I consider it to be one of the most important events in the past 100 years in political history, because a lot of what we see now became normalized in that election. And it is still true today. But Tom Foley, a man that a lot of people maligned at the time as an ineffective Speaker of a House, someone who ran a do-nothing Congress, actually did a lot. And if you compare it to what Congress is able to accomplish now, it's amazing. So he would later, after being in Congress, serve as the ambassador to Japan. Some deaths that occurred on this day. Nancy Reagan died in 2015 in Los Angeles. Mrs. Reagan, of course, was the... she died in 2016 at the age of 94. I had that written down wrong. She died in 2016 at the age of 94. She, of course, served as First Lady during the term of her husband, Ronald Reagan, as president from 1981 to 1989. And she had previously served as First Lady of California during Governor Reagan's 2 terms as Governor of California from 67 to 75. She was a very active First Lady. She was championed the Just Say No campaign. She was very active after President Reagan's Alzheimer's diagnosis in promoting stem cell research up till the end of her life. That was a very prominent issue for her later in life. And she was a very controversial figure in her time. People liked to malign her. And one thing that Nancy Reagan did that kind of spooked some people was she consulted an astrologer after the assassination attempt on her husband's life up to when he should have public events and when he shouldn't. Um, she was very protective of President Reagan, and actually was instrumental in the termination of a White House chief of staff because of how damaging she believed he was to her husband, and was very protective later in life of President Reagan's image and privacy during his battle with Alzheimer's. It was a very strong bond of love that lasted to the end, even when he had gone to a place that she couldn't reach him anymore. I have read and listened to people talk that she didn't want to leave his side even for any extended time, in the fear that he might wake up and she not be there. Um, and it's just a terrible, terrible sadness that I read about that, because the love that those two had was so strong. Um, you read that oftentimes, um, to them, they were the only two in the world. So a great First Lady died on this day, 2016. And at the time of her death, her funeral was attended by all the living First Ladies at the time. Michelle Obama, President Bush was there. Hillary Clinton took time out of her presidential campaign. Hillary Clinton was campaigning for the presidency. Um, at the time. Um, she took time out of her own run for president to pay her respect to Nancy Reagan. Um, and that is so, it's so yes. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.